There's a certain moment that some people recognize almost immediately. Someone offers to help with something simple. Maybe it's carrying something heavy, fixing a small problem, or helping with a decision. And almost without thinking, the response comes out automatically. It's okay, I've got it. Not said with pride, not said to prove anything, it's just the default response. The words appear before the person even has time to think about them. The interesting part is that the offer might have been completely genuine. The other person probably would have helped without hesitation. But somehow it still feels easier to handle it alone. From the outside, people tend to interpret this behavior in very simple ways. They might call it independence, determination, strength. Other times it's misunderstood completely. Someone might quietly assume the person is distant, or stubborn, or someone who just doesn't like relying on others. Over time, these labels start to follow the person everywhere. They become the independent one, the reliable one, the person who always figures things out on their own. And once that role settles in, something subtle begins to happen. The world starts expecting it, friends rely on it, colleagues assume it, even family members begin to treat it as normal. But what's rarely explained is that this pattern often has very little to do with personality. There's usually something deeper happening beneath it. What many people are actually experiencing is a psychological pattern, often described as hyperindependence. And despite how it looks from the outside, hyperindependence is not simply about liking to do things alone. It's often the nervous system learning a very specific lesson over time. That relying on yourself feels safer than relying on anyone else. Psychologists have studied this pattern through several different lenses. One of the most common comes from attachment research. Studies on early relationships suggest that when people repeatedly experience situations where support is inconsistent, unavailable, or emotionally unpredictable, the brain adapts. Not consciously, not as a deliberate decision, but as a quiet adjustment. The nervous system begins to treat self-reliance as the most reliable strategy available. Instead of asking for help and risking disappointment, the mind learns to reduce the need for help altogether. From a neuroscience perspective, this makes a surprising amount of sense. Our brains are constantly trying to predict outcomes. They build internal models based on past experience. If those experiences repeatedly suggest that depending on others leads to stress, rejection, or instability, the brain begins to adjust its expectations. Over time, independence stops feeling like a choice. It starts feeling like the default setting. Not because the person believes they are strong or alone, but because somewhere deep in the nervous system, relying on others has been categorized as uncertain territory. This doesn't always come from dramatic life events. Sometimes it develops through very subtle patterns. Growing up in an environment where emotional support wasn't openly expressed, being the responsible child who learned early to handle things quietly, experiencing moments where vulnerability was met with confusion instead of understanding. None of these experiences need to be extreme to shape the nervous system. Repeated enough times, they quietly teach the brain a very simple rule. If you want something handled, handle it yourself. Over time, this strategy becomes incredibly effective. Hyper-independent people often become highly capable adults. They learn how to problem solve quickly, adapt to new situations, and remain composed under pressure. Independence looks like confidence. Self-sufficiency looks like strength. But psychological patterns rarely come without trade-offs. The same adaptation that makes someone extremely capable can also make certain experiences more complicated. Accepting help, for example, can feel strangely uncomfortable. There can also be a quiet pressure that develops over time. When people see someone as endlessly capable, they may stop offering support altogether. Ironically, the more independent someone appears, the less help the world tends to offer them. This creates a subtle paradox. The person who has learned to rely on themselves the most often receives the least external support. But it's important to pause here and remove a common misunderstanding. Hyperindependence isn't a flaw, and it isn't something that needs to be fixed. Different people develop different survival strategies based on their environments. Neither pattern is inherently better or worse. They are simply different ways the nervous system learns to create stability. And in many cases, hyperindependence comes with strengths that are easy to overlook. People with this pattern often have a remarkable ability to stay calm during uncertainty. These traits don't come from nowhere. They're the result of years of internal adaptation. But there's another layer to this that many people don't realize. Hyper-independent individuals often care deeply about others. They become the person who shows up, the person who helps others solve problems. Because helping others often feels easier than needing help themselves. Sometimes what feels like personality is simply a pattern the nervous system learned long ago. If this experience felt strangely familiar, there's a good chance there are other patterns like this quietly shaping the way you move through the world.